Hi everyone, it's John Mitchell. In today's video, we're going to look at the different methods of termination. So throughout the series of videos in this outcome, we've looked at what does a manager do with people that are within the business and trying to get the most out of them. Well, there will be times where people leave the business, and that is what this video is all about. So termination is where the employee leaves a particular workplace, which ends essentially the employment relationship. So during termination, it's really important that the employee is treated fairly and lawfully. So whoever's managing the termination, they need to know the laws around termination so that it is done lawfully. As I mentioned before, there are different methods of termination, but they can be classed into two major categories. So voluntary, where the employee is actually making the decision to leave the business, and involuntary, where the business is making the decision to terminate the employee and forcing them out of the business. Now, as I said, we're going to go through the different methods of termination, and the first one here we've got is retirement. So this is where the employee is not only deciding to leave the business, but actually deciding to leave the workforce. Now, this can be a very large moment in someone's life, and it's important that the business treats it as such. So it's important that the business helps the retiree in their transition and also prepares themselves for the loss of talent and experience that they're going to lose. So it could be that they're losing a highly talented and highly experienced employee. Well, the business really needs to prepare themselves for that, and hopefully not only through bringing new people into the business, but hopefully they can prepare the people within the business to take on any responsibility that the retiree had. Now, what we need to look at with each of these methods of termination is to look at different entitlements and transition issues when they make sense. So entitlements, well, the employees are entitled to any accrued benefits that they have received along their working journey, such as annual leave or long service leave, so they can be paid out for those types of things. And with the transition issues, as I mentioned earlier, this can be a very significant moment in someone's life, and so it's important that the business treats it as such. So what they might do, what the business can do to help manage the transition is allow the employee to gradually transition into retirement. So rather than just working their normal hours and then all of a sudden the next year they've stopped retirement, here they can allow them to gradually reduce their working hours over a couple of years so that they start to get used to the transition that they are facing. Also, things like providing advice or counselling around the transition, so it could be lifestyle counselling or offering financial advice, bringing experts in to offer financial advice about how they're going to live off their superannuation, because all of a sudden they won't have the income that they previously had when they were working. Now, another form of termination is resignation, and this is where the employee voluntarily leaves the business. Now, that could be for a variety of reasons, including things like they're offered a promotion at another business, could be better conditions or better pay at another business. They might decide to change their career path, or they're going to study to change their career path. They might be bored with their current job. There's a whole variety of reasons why someone would want to leave the business in which they're working. So what a business can do is actually conduct what's known as an exit interview. So that's where they'll sit down with the employee and actually ask them some questions about why they're leaving, and also areas that they feel that the business needs to improve. So if an exit interview is conducted, it can help determine the actual reasons for the employee's departure, and the business may see some common trends. If there's multiple people deciding to leave the business over time, they may see some common trends and therefore identify issues that they need to improve to help retain their talented employees. So in terms of entitlements, well, someone that's resigning, they're entitled to the payment for completed work and any other accrued benefits, and also the business is entitled to be given notice. How much notice that the employee that's resigning needs to give the business, that's stipulated in their agreement. Now, the next form of termination is known as redundancy. So redundancy occurs when an employee leaves the business because their job no longer exists. Now, their job no longer exists. That could happen for a variety of reasons. Things like there could be technological changes where the technology can actually do the work of the employee, so therefore there's no need for the employee anymore. A restructure or poor financial performance where the business is looking to reduce wage costs, or even a merger where two businesses are coming together to form one new business, and therefore they don't need as many employees to operate the business as they used to. And with redundancy, it can be either voluntary or involuntary. So voluntary redundancy is where the employees actually nominate themselves to take the opportunity to leave the business. So this is different to resignation. What's happening here is that the business comes out and says that, okay, we're going to get rid of, and I'm just using an example here, 50 employees, and therefore they'll ask for employees to actually nominate themselves for who wants to take that opportunity. When that doesn't happen, or if there's numbers left over, the business will often go through involuntary redundancy, where the employees are then asked to leave the business because their job no longer exists. Now, if we look at the entitlements for business, some of the entitlements include that the employees are able to receive a redundancy package, or what you may see as severance pay, so where they're receiving a payment, the amount that they receive is normally based on how long they've worked at a particular business. They're entitled to be given notice for the redundancy, also pay and benefits for any work that's been conducted, and they're also entitled to time off to actually attend interviews and to find other work placements. So in terms of how much time off, how much the redundancy package they receive, and all those kind of things, those things are stipulated in their employment agreement that they signed when they started working at the business. In terms of transition, again, this can be a very difficult transition for some employees because they've gone through no fault of their own, they've been working and now they're going to be out of work. And so the business can provide things like counselling, and that could be career advice or any other type of counselling in terms of the employee may be finding it difficult, so receiving some kind of psychological counselling. Outplacement services. So outplacement services are an external organisation that comes in to help manage the transition for the employees. So what they will do, they'll help give them career advice, maybe even train them in interview skills and help find other places of work for them, so other job placements for them. Also, some businesses may provide training to help make their employees more employable and possibly even offer financial advice on how they can manage their finances during this difficult time. Now we're just going to go through an example to help clarify voluntary and involuntary redundancy. So let's say we've got a business here, it's got multiple employees, it's deciding to go through redundancy to try and reduce a certain percentage of their workforce. That will help reduce costs and improve efficiency. So for whatever reason, some of these positions are no longer required. So what they will do is, or what they might do, is offer voluntary redundancy. So notify the employees that there are certain percentage or a certain number of employees that will be made redundant, but ask for employees that if anyone would like to take this redundancy, please come forward. So put your hand up and come forward and receive the redundancy package. And what may happen then is that some employees that were thinking of leaving anyway may decide to go, yep, I'm going to take that redundancy package, and therefore they're going through voluntary redundancy. And some of those employees decide to leave from their own will. However, there might be some more jobs that no longer exist, and therefore the business will need to go through involuntary redundancy. So if there are extra employees that actually need to be removed from the workplace, therefore the business will actually tap those employees on the shoulder and say, I'm sorry, but your job no longer exists, and therefore you're going through involuntary redundancy, and they reduce some more employees from their workforce. And that's how voluntary and involuntary redundancy works. However, the redundancy package that the involuntary redundancy people or the employees that are going through involuntary redundancy is exactly the same. It's just the difference is that they are being tapped on the shoulder to say, I'm sorry, but your position no longer exists and we're nominating you to leave the workforce. The last method of termination is dismissal. So this is where the employee is terminated due to unacceptable behaviour or performance. There are two main methods of dismissal. One is summary dismissal, which is the most serious breach of the employment contract. They can be dismissed immediately without notice. So things like theft, serious breach of safety, turning up to work drunk, something like that. Then we have on notice dismissal. So this is more an ongoing process where an employee may be not performing to the high standard or to the standard that's expected. They're given notice about that performance. They're also given an opportunity to improve their performance. However, if over time that performance does not improve, therefore they can be dismissed on notice, and therefore the business is making the decision to terminate their employment contract. Now, in terms of entitlements, employees are entitled to any pay or accrued benefits that they've actually performed. So the business can't just dismiss them and not pay them for the work that they've completed. They're entitled to that kind of pay and any accrued benefits like long service leave, etc. Also, the transition issues. So some businesses may introduce career transition services to say, because not all dismissal is necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes things just haven't worked out with the business and the employee, and therefore the business is still trying to be socially responsible or ethical and look out for the employee to help them manage the transition. And so they may bring in, it's similar to outplacement services, but they bring in, career transition services to help find employment for that employee that has been dismissed. That's one process that they can actually implement to help manage the transition for the dismissed employee. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that it's important that businesses are lawful when they go through termination, and this is especially the case with dismissal because employees can claim for unfair dismissal. So unfair dismissal occurs when an employee has been dismissed in a harsh, unjust, or unreasonable manner. So some examples here, if they're absent from work due to illness or injury, they cannot be dismissed because of that. If they belong or don't belong to a trade union, they can't be discriminated against there and be dismissed because of that. And same with any other form of discrimination around race, sex, religion, and those types of things. So it's important that the human resource manager or whoever is responsible for the termination part of the business knows the laws and are trained in how to handle dismissals so that they don't have to go through the Fair Work Commission and have a hearing about unfair dismissal. So that's it for the 4 methods of termination. So in this video, we looked at the termination phase where we go through retirement, resignation, redundancy, both voluntary and involuntary, and also dismissal. So for questions, activities, and to find out more about our Unit 4 and exam preparation lectures, then come on over to teachingbubble.com.